Well, hello everybody. Chester, hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. Happy Veterans Day.
Okay, happy Veterans Day to you too. Hopefully you can see my screen.
Yep.
All right, wonderful. So we're going to give everybody a few minutes just to settle in. For those of you who are on, happy Veterans Day. And for those of you who are veterans, thank you so much for your service. I hope this has given you the opportunity to check in with us without all the demands of being at work, and that you'll be on to a very happy day of family and friends or just good old relaxation. So Chester, as we settle in here, maybe I'll just get started with just a few preliminaries. For those of you who have signed in on time without any sort of, technological hassles of any kind, welcome to you. We have Elizabeth Lane on. You probably will see her on your chat screen. She is our VP of Client Services. She'll be fielding any questions that you might have throughout the course of the webinar. You might notice on your sort of command screen, you'll see something that says questions. If you click on that left arrow, it should expand. And at that point, you can ask any questions and Elizabeth will field those. And then during a break in the action, we'll read those out to Chester or to me or to both of us. And feel free to ask questions at any time throughout the webinar. You do not have to wait for the appropriate time because Elizabeth will just field those and we'll be able to answer them shortly. Of course, if we do run out of time, because Chester and I tend to have fun when we're together and maybe we'll get carried away and run out of time for all the questions. And if that happens, please feel free to email them to either Chester or I or both of us, and we will absolutely get back to you, no problem at all. So let me just start off with a little bit of introductions. Actually, Chester, if you don't mind, why don't you just tell everybody how we met and just tell them anything you'd like them to know about me, and I'll do the same.
Perfect. Well, before we get started, I really do want to give tribute to our veterans. My father was a veteran. We have kind of an adopted son that lived with us for a long time. We joined the Army a little while ago, Romario Herbert, and he actually just shipped off to Afghanistan yesterday. So we're very appreciative for all the veterans and all the wonderful things they do. How did we meet? Well, Denise, you and I met through Marshall Goldsmith, the MG100 Pay It Forward group, and well, it's been a romance ever since. I would say that we was love at first sight. So, and you should know a lot of good things about Denise, the top 20 attorney nationally. I mean, you can read her wonderful bio here on the screen. Part of the MG100. The thing I think that you're most proud of recently is this being accepted into the Microsoft startups for apps. Less than 1% get accepted, and so that's total kudos to you. I think the thing that you should know about Denise that I appreciate more than anything is she has a wonderful zest for life. She's incredibly driven. When she puts her mind to something, things get done. And so whenever we meet, I'm just along for the ride. So that's what we're going to do today. Denise is going to drive it, and I will chime in from time to time. It's wonderful to know you, Denise, and I really hope that everybody that's tuned in now or later, I know that you'll take away some great nuggets from Denise. She's delightful.
Thank you so much. And I hope you're right about that. When I say I'm going to get something done, I get it done, because I don't, my vow is I'm not leaving this earth until we have gender parity among other things. And so I am very hopeful that you are correct. And I so appreciate your friendship, Chester. So let me tell you a little bit about Chester. First of all, I know you're going to find that he is one of the funnest people that you have ever met in your life. And actually, Chester, that's the one thing that worries me, is that everybody's going to think you're way more fun than I am. And that's okay. I can live with that. So as Chester mentioned, we did meet through the MG 100s. That's Marshall Goldsmith's legacy coaching team. So we have the advantage of being surrounded with some 98 other people who are tremendous thought leaders in whatever they do. Chester is a leadership guru, period. For those of you who follow him, you already know he's a best-selling author. He's sold over 1.6 million copies of not just one, but multiple books. He is the father of 4 beautiful children. I forgot to mention I'm the mother of 2 incredible children. And Chester, I see that you added that you're a huge fan of me, and of course I'm a huge fan of you as well. So for those of you who follow us and don't know Chester, you're about to be delighted. So let me share with you a little bit of the agenda that we have today. We are going to talk to you about what kind of results you can expect from a happy workforce. And as you can see from your screen here, you can be expected to receive unbelievable advances in engagement and productivity, customer retention, reputation and branding scores, you name it, and you're going to see an increase in actual business results from having a happier workforce. Our mission, of course, is to accelerate the inclusion agenda for being happy. It's our position that when people feel that they belong and that they feel included, that they are happier, and that is what leads to the incredible advances in the business agenda that you see on your screen here. So whenever you're talking to senior leaders about the agenda for inclusion, I would invite you to take a look at the business statistics on this and help them to realize that it's not just about everybody playing well in the sandbox, but the actual fiscal results that go along with this particular agenda.
And Denise, if I could just chime in really quick,
Yeah.
on that first bullet point about, engagement going up, there's no question that when your voice is heard, and this is the work we've been doing for over 20 years, that your feeling of being able to make a contribution, that you are valued. And there's nothing does that better than to feel like I'm included. And when we talk about inclusion, often we think about gender and race and so on. I think what your app does that is so brilliant is it brings in diversity of thought, diversity of background. And when those conversations happen, and when people feel like they are valued, in other words, their voice is heard, obviously you would expect engagement to go up. And those numbers, when engagement goes up, productivity goes up, and everything flows from there. So that bullet point in particular, I wanted to just make a comment, is brilliant.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Chester and I both decided to give you your very own quote. My quote, as you can see, is very much related to the fact that the human state of belonging is rooted in acceptance and inclusion, and even more so than that, that we actually crave that feeling. We crave the connection to something that's bigger than ourselves. Some people call that a higher power, and everyone defines that differently. For me, I get my higher power from the connection with others, and I derive a tremendous amount of purpose and meaning from that. And Chester, you have your own way of looking at this, don't you?
I do. My father was my first manager, my best friend, my mentor, and he was somebody that never took himself too seriously, as you can see from his photo there. Happiness is a choice. He'd always say, you know what, Chess, choose to be happy. And I honestly believe that. When you wake up in the morning, you've got a choice. You can choose to be inclusive, you can choose to be kind, you can choose to be happy. And I hope that we'll give you some tools in this webinar to do exactly that, because I got to tell you, nobody was happier than my dad. Nobody.
I can tell. He looks absolutely amazing.
And
I
he
wish
did play a mean ukulele, let me tell you.
that's awesome. That is just awesome. All right, so our agenda is I'm going to talk a little bit about the three R's of inclusion at the core of that sense of belonging, and then Chester is going to talk about the three practices of gratitude that are at the core, in particular, of his new book, but also just part of his belief system, and we'll try to integrate how those two work together, and be able to demonstrate to you what this looks like in the workplace, and then talk to you a little bit at the end about the tools that we can use to perpetuate this whole agenda, this whole priority that we're sharing with you. So, Chester, I'll start with the three R's, since it's the core of everything we do. And then just once I explain it, just chime in with your thoughts about any of the three principles. And then, feel free to bring me in when you talk about the practices of gratitude, if you feel like I can contribute to that as well. The three R's of inclusion, according to Lead Inclusively, according to our company, is to be receptive, reflective, and revitalizing. And I'll sort of explain those one at a time. We used to talk a lot about acceptance as the concept of receptivity, and I'm not saying that isn't important. It is super important. But we now know that it needs to be more of an active act rather than a passive state. And so now we're focused, when we talk to leaders and managers, on how to demonstrate and actual curiosity, and to be curious about these differences as one of the essential elements of creating inclusion on a team. Chester, what are your thoughts about that?
I really think you've hit on something really important for leaders. I think the difference between good leaders and extraordinary leaders is always their ability to relate to their direct reports, the ability of leaders to, you say, being open to others. That is simply, finding the time to spend time with your people. And I know the biggest reason leaders don't do it is they say, I don't have time. I'm multitasking. We've got, crushing quotas or deadlines, and we just got to get the hard things done. Well, it's these kinds of things, the softer side of being a leader, that really is inclusive. And what that means is open to others' differences is literally sitting down and asking questions. What do you think your best contribution is to the team? Where would you like to be 2 to 3 years from now? What are some of the things that you're struggling with that I might be of help? And get together those questions that you feel can open up a conversation of discovery. Because when there's silence, when there's just, assignments, when there's a distance, that's when I don't feel like my voice is heard. That's when I feel like I'm not being included. So this being accepting to other people's differences, to me, the thing that you've got to marry with that is time. Right. And the greatest gift you can give people is time. The curious part, there's no question. If you're going to be innovative, if you're going to keep driving your business, you've got to instill that curiosity. We always say, put some binoculars in the room. And what we mean by that is, do you remember when you were a kid, the first time you discovered binoculars? How cool they were, and you looked in the opposite way and everybody was way far away, and then you looked at your hand. The idea of leaders putting things in people's way to get them curious. Maybe it's an assignment that takes them out of their comfort zone. Maybe it's a team you're putting together to bring in a new product. I've got a friend who's brilliant, and what he does is he'll take people on excursions, and he'll take them to like a chef's kitchen, or he'll take them to the designers of roller coasters and whatnot, completely out of their realm of their business, to spur curiosity about the world around them. What are some of the things you've seen that leaders have done to spur that curiosity, Denise?
Yeah, I'm gonna preface that by, first of all, buttressing what you just said, but also just acknowledging that as leaders, we want to teach, right? And we think that we have to do that by speaking, by talking about our life experience and our wisdom. And I'm not taking away from the fact that we have wisdom or that we have the right to share that wisdom, but if we can possibly translate that need as leaders to want to teach, educate, or in some cases even mentor and coach, and back up a little bit and realize that by asking questions, we're actually teaching more than when we tell. So I would say, Chester, in answer to your question, that the most inclusive leaders that I have seen are the ones that get that and that are asking rather than telling, and really, and asking in a way that you can tell that they actually want to hear the answer. Because if I ask and then my eye contact is off, or I'm looking over someone's shoulder, or I'm looking at my watch and waiting for the next thing to do, then I can ask as many questions as I want, but I'm not going to be perceived as an inclusive leader.
Excellent. Hey, welcome my new friends. I'm here doing a webinar, and they walked in. I'm at the Old Forge Library, and they said, "Oh, the library's closed." And I said, "Yeah, but we're here to clean it up. So thank you for keeping the library so pristine." Only in Old Forge, New York.
Well, explain to our listeners what happened to you this morning with the snow and the internet and the whole bit.
Well, this library is an amazing, gift to the community. And whenever wherever we're up here, we have a little cabin up on West Lake, and they'll give me a room, and they've got great Wi-Fi, and the Wi-Fi is in the parking lot, which is great, and anybody can use it. And I thought, well, this is great. I'll come up. We'll do this afternoon webinar, not realizing, of course, it would be closed for Veterans Day. So. I love the community and the wonderful people up here. So yeah, so let me make room so he can come in. There we go.
I asked Matt if we should worry about that, and he said, "Are you kidding? Chester's scrappy. He'll figure it out." And indeed he did. So thank you, Chester.
You bet.
Hi.
Okay, go ahead.
And happy cleaning to everybody. Yeah, I guess cleaning doesn't stop just because we're celebrating Veterans Day, does it?
No, right. I love these guys up here. They just get stuff done. Anyway, reflective.
All right. We'll go on to the second R, which is reflective. Again, there are two components to each aspect of the three R's. The second, in terms of the second R, is reflective, and it does mean that we need to be self-aware, right? We can't be inclusive leaders unless we know about our own biases. And by the way, if it makes you feel any better, we all have them. So I'd love to be able to tell you that as a woman who's experienced a lot of barriers in the workplace, that I have no unconscious bias. And if I did that, I would be being extremely inauthentic, because if you have a brain, you have bias. It's just a matter of being able to be aware of it. The two examples that I give are, I used to hate tattoos, and I would have to consciously, if I saw someone who was, tattooed, from wrist to shoulder, what have you, I would have to consciously tell myself to focus on what they were saying, on their credentials, on what they could contribute to our organization. Luckily, over time, that's faded, because both my boys have tattoos now. So how in the world could I hate tattoos when I love my kids, right? But at the time, I really
had. Does tattoos say "I love you, Mom"? Because that would be.
I'm not going to say which son, but one son actually, he does have Mom with a heart on it, and it's really kind of cool, actually. But at the time that it wasn't cool, the important thing was not that I didn't think it was cool. The important thing is that I didn't let it interfere in my decision making. That I was conscious of it, and therefore actively filtering that out and focusing on what I needed to focus on. I had a super bad experience when I was in France when I was young, just awful. And I would have like a visceral reaction for years and years later when I heard a French accent. Now, if I were unable to be aware of that and to basically take that out of my mental repertoire when I met other people. Imagine all of the people in my life as I traveled the world that would have been excluded from my experience as a person and as a professional. So unfortunately, we can't get away with not having those biases, but if we're aware of them, then we're in way better shape. And the transparency portion of that is that to the extent that it's feasible, we want to, as managers and leaders, be as transparent about our decisions as possible, because we're going to create more trust in our teams and more inclusivity and more happiness, period. And we can only do that if our decisions are being based on facts and on objectivity. Once we lose that, once we're not inclusive, then we lose the opportunity to be transparent, and then create a whole bunch of problems on our team that reduce the happiness of our team and the sense of belonging. Chester, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, let me just jump back up to self-aware. You know, and you do have those biases. I think it ties back into the what we were talking about before about being curious. You know, if you think of getting rid of your biases as being more curious, curious about tattoos, curious about your accent, curious about your background, rather than take offense. You know, not to quote my father too much, he would also say, you know, you have to choose to be offended. And I love that attitude. So choose not to be offended. Choose to be curious. Right. Instead of being offended, why not ask? That's kind of interesting that you have, you know, flames tattooed on your face. There's got to be a story there. You know, isn't that an interesting accent? Tell me about, you know, I love taxi drivers in New York and Uber drivers everywhere. Every one of them has a story. And I'm always curious as to how long have you been an Uber driver? Tell me about your accent. Why did you come? I'll tell you, I was just in California, and my Uber driver, Ahmed, I got to talking to him. I said, Ahmed, where are you from? He says, oh, I'm from Beirut. I said, really, how long have you been here? He said, 10 years. I said, well, why did you come? He says, oh, to keep my children safe. And he talked about this whole transition of all the work he does and how they've sacrificed for their family to keep their kids safe. Well, I could have chosen to say, well, that's a foreign accent. And, you know, with all the media that we get about how to be so defensive about that, and I could have easily taken offense. Instead, asking the questions, it was a beautiful story. And yes, I gave him 5 stars and a 30% tip. So the point is that it all works out, being more self-aware if you couple that with curiosity. And again, that transparency. No one wants to work in a place where they've got to figure out what you meant by what you said. Right? I know what you said. What did that really mean? That's when you're in an environment that's not transparent. But when you say what you mean and you mean what you say, we can focus on the problem and move on, solve the customer issue, whatever it might be. To me, transparency is the synonym in the workplace to open and honest. Yep. And that honest part, I think, is the key word. Am I honest in my dealings? Am I honest in my conversations? That's transparency. So all these things to me come back to your first idea there of being curious. I think when you have a curious workplace and when people are open to those kinds of things, and to use are receptive, things immediately start to get better. So I love that your first R is the receptive part. Without that, the rest doesn't flow.
And as you pointed out, they build on each other, right? Because it's not a coincidence that we say receptive first and then reflective, because of the curiosity component that you just mentioned. And I do love the way you used the taxi example, because you can actually see how that sharing probably did lead to happiness, not only in the fact that he got a great tip based on whatever you were experiencing about the connection, but also his opportunity to share what he has experienced and to turn what could have been an exclusionary experience based on accent or a limitation in language to something that was incredibly positive. So I'm going to move on to revitalizing, because I want to make sure we have plenty of time, Chester, for your principles of gratitude. The third R in revitalizing has to do with the ability of leaders to actually empower others regardless of their differences. So not sort of, giving them a fish, so to speak, but teaching them to fish. The quote below we have is, leaders become great not because of their power, but their ability to empower others. And again, it's sometimes difficult to do, because for those of us who have strived to get to the top, I'll never forget when I was at the top as a senior leader, a partner at Ernst & Young, which is a 300,000 person institution. And I had gone from being a single mom, building a business and just working 24/7 and having no budget for anything, for innovation or anything else, to a $12 million budget, and having, a very small, wonderful, but, scrappy team, to having a huge team. I remember just that sense of, pride and for, I want to say a moment, I hope it was not more than a moment, this sense of, I don't know, entitlement, or, just being pumped up, by the power of what I had accomplished and my status. And I'm not saying that I shouldn't have been proud. Of course, I should have had that sense of pride. But within a short period of time, I realized if I lose that sense of connection, empathy, that I have with my team, and somehow get caught up in this sense of grandeur, that it was going to be my unraveling. And so that was a very humbling experience. And then in terms of the inspiring portion of it, the way we are talking about inspiring is the ability of our ability to inspire others to engage in inclusive behaviors based on how we are behaving. So if I talk all day long about inclusion and then talk over people, in team meetings, I run into trouble, and it happens sometimes, particularly when I'm aggravated, or I'm rushed, or anxious or tense. I will do that, and then I need to stop and back up and basically apologize and say, look, I'm not showing up the way I want to show up. I need to do this differently, hold me accountable. Chester, I'll yield to you for your thoughts.
Sure. Empowering to me is empowering and inspiring kind of go hand in hand. I think it all comes about with the leader that's encouraging, that encourages you to try new things. Along with empowering, I think what's really important is tolerance for mistakes. And we'll talk about this around being grateful. This idea that, look, people show up wanting to do a good job, whether it was your scrappy team or your big team. I honestly believe there are very few people in the world that get up in the morning and say, you know what, my goal today, I'm going to screw up. In fact, I'm going to screw up so bad. They want to do a good job, right? And along the way, they're going to make mistakes. And the empowerment is that giving people permission to not be perfect. Yeah. And to know that when they make a mistake, the best thing they can do is tell you about it. Because when you're in the opposite kind of culture, the first thing you want to do when you make a mistake is hide it, right? And hope that, or blame somebody else. It was Christy's fault. That's my go-to. Anyway, the ability of leaders then to aspire is, you talked about this earlier, I want to be part of something bigger than myself. I want to have a noble cause. We have our online assessment on what motivates people in the workplace, and particularly younger generations want to know that they're making an impact. So anything you can do as a leader, and I think this is very revitalizing, is to know that what you do matters, that you make a difference, and that when you make that difference, I noticed it and celebrated it. In other words, it's not just that we made a better widget. We made a difference for each other on the team. We made a difference for a client or a customer. We made a difference in our community. And that, to me, is the inspiring part. We just didn't make better widgets. We're making a better world. And if you can connect those dots, that is incredibly revitalizing.
I agree. And you just reminded me, Chester, of a situation where a team member had been, I'm just going to say, dishonest, and I have known him for years and years and years. He's never dishonest. And when I confronted him and said, why why didn't you tell it like it was? He said, because I was afraid to disappoint you. And I realized I was coming down too hard, and I had created a situation where it was better for him in his mind to be dishonest than to, to disappoint me. So I think I love the way you said, we don't get up in the morning to say, I think I'm going to screw up today. I'm going to remember that. That will help me get through a few strategic moments.
Right. Well, you made a very important point there. He was afraid. You were managing by fear, and you
Yep.
didn't realize you were managing by fear. You thought, I'm just being demanding. We got to get
Yep.
her done.
Yep.
And that is where I think this reflecting, when
Yep.
leaders step back and reflect and say, gosh, I actually caused somebody that I have great respect for to lie to me. And it was more my fault than his fault.
Well,
And why?
and the
Because they
thing is
were.
that, as you said, of course I didn't intend that, but I was so focused on the goal, on the end goal, that I was not focusing on the journey. And at the end of the day, if that journey isn't going to be, happy and filled with good feelings, even when we succeed, we are not, we've given up whatever months or years it took to get there by not being present and by not, being true to these principles that we have spoken about. So let me now that we have sort of that basis, of talking about the three R's, which is the foundation of all of our work at Lead Inclusively. So it drives our leadership assessment, it drives our live learning, it drives our e-learning, it drives the app that we're building that Chester mentioned. I'll refer to that a little bit later. Now let's move on, Chester, because we have the opportunity in a few minutes to talk about your principles of gratitude and how they fit in here, and as well as the tools associated with that you've established. But before we do that, Elizabeth, do we have questions that we can answer for folks?
Yes, there are a couple here, and if anyone has questions, of course, as we go through, feel free to just submit those in the questions dashboard here. So the first question is partially a comment. I feel that unlocking happier workplaces is about helping employees who are less fortunate than most of us bosses. How can we act to make the world less harsh on those people? What can we do?
Okay. Chester, do you want to start?
Yes, I think what we're talking about is to get to know them. Whenever you feel like you're in a harsh workplace, I think there's a disconnect between you and the boss. If there's one statistic everybody agrees on, it's the number one impact on an employee's happiness or engagement at work is the relationship with the immediate supervisor. And so when you talk about a harsh workplace, to me, it always comes back to communication. Do I know my manager? Does my manager know me? And not just know me, know those things that I consider valuable, that are important to me, whether it's my family or my faith or my work ethic or my ability to solve problems or my creativity. Once we know those kinds of things, listen, I love history. I've been somewhat a student of history my whole life. Where wars happen and horrible things happen, it's because people just didn't take the time to get to know each other and to understand each other. Communication broke down. There was a gap. So I think that's, to me, one of the key things you can do is find the time, ask the questions, and as you would say, be inclusive, be kind.
Yeah, and I think I'll piggyback on that by saying the two most significant questions that I feel we can ask to anyone who's struggling is, how can I make your life better? Or more specifically in the workplace, how can I help you to achieve your goals?
Right.
as opposed to, in other words, what are the barriers that are getting in your way? Now, there may be, along the lines of less fortunate, whatever that might be. It might be a mother who's struggling with her hours because of her dual responsibility with kids, or a father for that matter. Someone who has a disability, whether it's learning or communications. There may be some things that you don't have any control over, but asking the question nevertheless with a genuine wish to hear more and to potentially contribute or to refer someone to resources that could help will make a huge difference, I think, in terms of,
I'll tell you the two questions you should really avoid at all costs is, how old are you and how much do you weigh? I found those questions. Yeah, those don't work very well at all.
Elizabeth, any other questions for now?
Yes, kind of a follow-on to the first question. Someone else is asking how to focus on marginalized people or diverse people without others feeling that it's a zero-sum game.
Okay, so I'll have to do a little bit of sort of interpretation of that question and just hope to get it right. I assume what the questioner is asking is how not to place maybe an inordinate amount of attention on one person, to the exclusion of others. And, it's interesting to me, and Chester, you're a white male, so I'll let you, kind of,
I'm proud of it, by the way.
Back onto this, but I have spoken to a lot of very senior, white males who I would normally associate with, being, having very few impediments to their careers, to their career trajectory, to their gravitas, etc. And it always surprises me and humbles me that, the vast majority of people, all people that I have spoken to, have experienced exclusion at some point in their life. So I'm just going to give an example of a very senior leader who's a white male, who came over to this country and experienced religious discrimination in the neighborhood that he was living in, always felt inadequate, basically grew up with this sense of not being a part of, his community, et cetera. Now, in a million years, I never would have assumed that he had experienced any sort of sense of exclusion. And so, in answer to the question, I think the idea is that this sense of inclusion should permeate everything you do with everyone. I'm not taking away from the female journey. Trust me, it's my mission in life to move women through middle management to senior leadership. And I am by no means marginalizing people of color or anyone else who really has an impediment to success, just on a daily basis, an extra barrier that many of us will never have to experience. But I think the simple answer to the question is to just let this sense of inclusion permeate our leadership behaviors in everything we do. And Chester, let me hear from you, and then I think we need to move on, just for I'm looking at the clock here for time purposes.
Sure. I interpreted that a little differently. Sometimes in our quest to be inclusive, we are perceived as making exceptions to people, and that's that zero-sum game, because, well, you're treating them so differently, And I think that the great leaders right up front say, of course we're going to treat each other differently because we're different. The old school was we treat everybody the same because that's fair, and the new school is we treat everyone fairly and yet differently. And I think as long as you have that on your team, that of course a single parent is going to be treated a little differently than someone who's new in their career and single when it comes to working weekends or whatever. So I think this idea that, look, with inclusivity is going to come a lot of differences. And with those differences is going to come the decision that I'm going to make as a leader that we're going to make exceptions. And those are going to be different and they're going to be fair. And we're all going to buy into that, and we're all going to realize that there different employees at different stages in their lives and their careers are going to need different things from the workplace. And as long as you're open and upfront, again, coming back from that honest and open communication, it never becomes a zero-sum game. In fact, it becomes empowering from everyone in the workplace to say, I know that I'm going to be appreciated for who I am, and I am different than other people on the team. And again, for a myriad of reasons, not just gender and race or age. It's going to be because of, ability and capability and where I am in my life trajectory. So I love that question.
Agreed. Thank you. All right, so Chester, it's on you now. Apparently there's an art and a science to gratitude. So I want to hear from you all about that.
You bet. We do ask the question, what is gratitude and why is it important? And if I were to ask you that question, Denise, why is gratitude so important in the workplace, or is it important in the workplace?
Well, I'm going to say absolutely it's important that we perpetuate motivation and a sense of wanting to achieve when our managers and leaders are able to tell us that the job that we did was great and that they really appreciate us being around and doing what we're doing.
And what would be your definition? What would be the opposite of gratitude in the workplace or in life? Really?
A lack of acknowledgement, maybe a sense of scarcity rather than abundance.
Yeah, I think everyone has their own interpretation. I love the definition of the opposite of gratitude as being entitlement. And I think no one wants to work in an area where people feel entitled. Certainly leaders don't, where there's an entitlement. And I'm not going to be grateful for something that is due to me already. It was really interesting. Adrian Gostick is my co-author. And our work originated in reward and recognition in the workplace. We wrote a book called The Carrot Principle. More carrots, less sticks, right? So we've got a little mascot. And I think there's a difference between recognition and gratitude. Recognition to me is a little more of an event-driven. It's a little more programmatic. I think those things are important, recognizing people's loyalty to the company or, the employee of the month or the ideas and innovation, I think all very important. Gratitude to me is all about a way of being and a culture where people feel included, where they feel valued and appreciated. We give a definition, say, I believe what I do matters, I make a difference, and when I made a difference, it was noticed and celebrated. Which begs the question, so how do you do it? So if we jump to the next slide, it's we instruct leaders of any area, whether you're new or mature or in between, how's it done, is to give gratitude now, give it often, and don't be afraid. And what I mean by give it now is, we have the analogy that gratitude is like a banana. It doesn't keep for very long. Right? You think you're going to remember to express that gratitude maybe at the end of the week or the end of the quarter or certainly in the annual review, and you don't. Primacy, recency. The sooner you express that gratitude, the more impact it has. The more it's viewed as being important because I do important things now. I don't put it off. If I've done something great and a long period of time takes place, we have the funny analogy. The guy says, I meant to tell you what a great job you did on that account. Now, I know it's been a while. I think it was Valentine's Day. Yeah, because you wore a lot of red that day. You know what I mean? The longer the space, the less impact it has.
Chester, I want to just ask you, excuse me for the interruption, but I wanted to ask you also, what about the specificity of it? The great job versus I really liked, the way you, with some degree of specificity on the expression of gratitude.
Well, excellent comment, and it leads right into giving it often. Because a lot of times leaders would say, well, you can give too much recognition, it becomes trite. I defy you to find someone who goes home at the end of the day and says to their spouse or their partner, I couldn't get anything done today. I just got too much recognition. They were just praising me all day. When we do these assessments of organizations and cultures, you know what the lowest score is? Without question, it's how I was valued in the workplace. To your point, if you're going to give praise and recognition and all you're doing is saying, great job, that has little to no impact. What you've so adroitly grabbed hold of is specificity. What did I do? How did I do it? So that I can replicate that behavior and do it again, because that rewarded behavior is repeated. And when people are grateful for my contributions, I want to make those contributions again. If the gratitude and if that moment is too general,
Right.
I'm kind of at sixes as to, well, what did I do exactly to
So
get that?
what does don't be afraid mean from the point? I mean, like why would you be afraid to give gratitude?
And I would ask the same question, and I think it's appropriate right after Halloween. Everybody's been scared out of their minds. The idea is managers are afraid to give recognition for a couple of reasons. One is they don't think they'll do it right, that it'll be misinterpreted. They're afraid that if I can give Denise some praise and recognition for what she's done, Bob will feel like, well, I did the same thing and you never said anything. That we'll leave somebody out, that it won't appear to be fair and equitable. And so what we say is, look, you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to see everything. So the fallback is to not do anything. I'm not going to express any gratitude. I'm not going to make anybody feel good about themselves, because I'm afraid that if I do, someone will be offended.
Right.
When you put it in that context, they all go, well, that makes sense. In the moment, it didn't make sense, right? So this idea, don't be afraid. Venture out there, ask for help. Ask people, say, you know what, when you really perform, and we want to give that great expression of gratitude, what would be a great way to reward and recognize you? Would it be time with your family? Would it be overtime? I'll never forget my dad. I got a job at Sparling Sporting Goods. And, sporting, because we were a very athletic family, so it was perfect because we got discounts on everything, right? My dad loved a discount. And he'd say after about 2 or 3 weeks, he says, how's it going? He said, oh, it's going really well. I love working there. He says, well, are they happy with your work? And I said, they are, Dad. In fact, they're so happy with my work, they've given me Saturday off. And he looked at me and he goes, what? If they really liked you, wouldn't they give you like more work? His generation was, if they loved you, they loaded you up, right? My generation was, why wouldn't I want to go play tennis?
Right.
So this idea of being afraid and thinking you're going to make a mistake, it'll be misinterpreted. Trust me, when you are grateful, when you express that gratitude, and someone's done a great job, those things are always appreciated, even when you don't do it well. Even when you don't. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you and I do some executive coaching.
Yeah, the simple no. What about that?
Yeah, I love the idea. See, well, where can I start? And I say, you know what? Have you ever received a handwritten note? And they say, yeah. And I said, did you keep it? I said, yes, I did. They said, why did you keep it? Well, it was personal. It was a different conversation. It was uninterrupted. So if you jump to the next slide, what I say is, look, yeah, of course I kept it. So jump to the next slide and say, look, write 3 notes a week for 3 weeks. And you know what? When it shows up, it's always appreciated. And if you're having a tough day, I've got a friend that not only does he write handwritten notes, when he's having a tough day, he'll set his phone for a 2-minute timer, and he'll jump to his notes section and he'll write down all the people and the things that he's grateful for. And he says, after 2 minutes, I feel a lot better about myself, and I feel a lot better about my team, which is the next step, which is keep a gratitude journal. Just write down, click again there, just write down 2 or 3 things a day that you're appreciative for. The University of Pennsylvania did a study, University of California did a study. People that write down the things they're grateful for and create this culture and this spirit of gratitude, they have less stress, they're more open to other people, they sleep better. Simple little things that we should be appreciative for.
I like the chocolate covered bananas.
Drinkable water, Yeah. So simple little things that you can do. And why do you do it? And why is this tie into your inclusiveness and being happy at work? Is the stat that's on the next slide, Denise. And it's my favorite data point of all time, is that when you're happy at work, when you're engaged in what you're doing, when you're motivated by what you do at work, you're 150% more likely to be happy at home. And we all know that, right? We've all had jobs that we were miserable, we hated those jobs, and we took that hate and we brought it home. Absolutely. We shared it with everybody. And when they were sick of hearing about it, we went outside and kicked the cat, don't like cats. The point is, the point is that as leaders, as you create this culture of inclusivity, as you create this culture of gratitude, not only do you engage your people more and you get more productivity and all those wonderful statistics that you had in your first couple of slides, you send people home happy. And I think more and more, we don't work 9 to 5. Nobody works 9 to 5 anymore. We've all got smartphones. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. You're expected to respond to those texts. You're expected to respond to those demands. And because we now just have one big life that's inclusive of our families, our passions, and our work, our jobs as leaders is to make sure that we have happy and engaged and fulfilled leaders and happy and engaged and fulfilled people that come to work with and for us every day, because the ripple effect is huge. And the biggest contribution I think that great leaders make to their communities is happy people. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, Denise.
All right. Elizabeth, I think we have time for only one question in this particular segment so that we can make sure that we get on to tools and how this shows up in the workplace.
Sure. Okay, one question here. You mentioned it's your choice to be offended. I've seen a lot of people say that the younger generations are more offended or are always offended by things. I am someone in this younger generation. I'm having a bit of a hard time understanding where these assumptions come from. Is it that the younger generation is choosing to be offended, or the older generation not acknowledging that they might be saying something offensive? I understand your answer might be pure opinion, but do you have any thoughts on understanding this presumable generation gap?
All right, I'm going to give a very quick answer, and that is, it drives me insane the way some people talk about this younger generation or refer to them as millennials or what have you, and in a way that stereotypes them or makes them seem like they fit into a category. My entire staff, just about my core staff, with the exception of the advisory team and the C-suite, is from that generation. I have never experienced a more motivated group of people who are more defined by purpose than that generation. So I don't know where it's coming from. I surmise that it might be about the immediate gratification that is, achieved through technology. The sense that that generation is very focused on their phones. But to be honest with you, we're all focused on our phones. We might not be focused on video games or what have you, but we are addicted to our phones. And I could absolutely see that generation be feeling offended on a daily basis by all these assumptions that are being made. I think, Chester, I might move on to the next two sections here, just in the interest of time. But if there's any sort of extra that you want to add in that might make this person feel better or more understood, please feel free.
Just be aware of your biases. Don't pigeonhole people. Just talk to them. And the more you talk to people, the less likely you are to be offended. Be curious, be kind, and you can. That, by the way, and that's not a generational thing. That's an everybody thing, right?
Yeah. Agreed. All right, so let's talk about what this looks like at work. At Lead Inclusively, we found that there are 5 areas to embed these behaviors on your team, and we feel so strongly about it that we have actually developed technology that uses AI and nudge messaging to support embedding these behaviors on your team. So I'm just going to share these 5 areas briefly, and then Chester, if you want to comment on them, feel free. Some of them are super obvious. So, we have meetings every single day. If they're not conducted inclusively, then you've simply missed a huge opportunity to embed inclusion and belonging and that sense of happiness that we've been talking about for the past almost 1 hour. Hiring, I think, is also very easy to understand. Diversity starts with having a diverse workplace, and then it is perpetuated by inclusion, by the inclusive behaviors that keep people there and and move them on through the, through the talent pipeline to senior leadership positions. Team development is really around giving everyone a fair shot to become a leader, to be given stretch opportunities, to be able to shine so that they can be considered leadership material, and to make sure that your succession planning is balanced so that we can see more women and people of color at the top of organizations, which goes hand in hand with performance management, right? If we're not managing conducting performance evaluations in such a way that is equitable and that is not based on bias and not based on our sense of affinity with one person versus another, then we're not going to be able to create the kind of inclusive environment that is, from a very practical point of view, perpetuating women and people of color and moving them up through the sticky middle to the C-suite. And probably the least thought about is the strategy and planning aspect of this, and that is that sometimes we're not considering all the stakeholders when we make strategy decisions or planning decisions, and even more so, or just as important, we're not consulting diverse sources of information. It's very natural, if you have a certain political point of view, or a certain historic point of view, or emotional or mental point of view, to constantly be looking at the same sources of information that are going to perpetuate your own beliefs. And we have to sometimes move beyond our own belief system, and the way to do that is to get exposed to diverse sources of information when we're doing our strategy and planning. So let me turn it over to Chester to see if he's got anything to say about these 5 areas of how to embed inclusion at work and to create the kind of happiness that we've been talking about.
I know we're coming up to close to the top of the hour. I just want to make one point. I think it ties back to our earlier question about performance management, eliminating those personal biases. I think that's just so important in the workplace, where we really do feel like we all matter and our opinions are heard, that we have this inclusiveness, that, good ideas come from everywhere. And when you feel that that's the kind of culture you're in, productivity goes up, strategy gets easier, all those things get easier, and communication becomes much more clear and much more honest. I think the thing that your app does so well is meeting people where they are. And that was the part about your app that I thought was so cool. I know we probably don't have time for questions on this, but this idea of start, scale, and sustain, I think it's just brilliant. I think you should spend some time on that before we run out of time.
Okay, no worries. And there's never going to be enough time, let's face it, to talk about these issues. For those of you who are on holiday, you feel free to stay on a little bit extra as Chester freezes himself in the vestibule of the library there to get internet. But I'm sitting in a very comfortable office, so I can stay a little longer. But in any case, yes. So our concept is when you're dealing with inclusion issues, most organizations are either starting their journey, they're scaling their journey, or they're sustaining it. The other 2 steps, the scale and sustain, really depend on what's happened at the start. So if you're using a flawed diversity and inclusion strategy, if you're not measuring the right things, if you don't have an actual roadmap that is based on goals and milestones to reach those goals and action steps associated with those, simply put, you're going to fail in the sense that you're not going to necessarily achieve anything. You could be spinning your wheels. You could have a very great ERG, employee resource group, where women get to talk to each other, people of color get to talk to each other, but you're not necessarily going to do what we're meant to do, which is to decrease attrition in organizations, particularly for women and people of color, so that we can keep that diversity going, increase employee engagement so that we can get the promise from all people, from diverse people, and get that thought leadership and investment and innovation. And have an actual plan. So, which is going to necessarily include the right learning. So learning about how to raise your unconscious bias awareness, but also what inclusive behaviors are, like the 3 R's that we spoke about, and how to utilize them, what they look like in the workplace. So when we engage with clients, our scale will include, a leadership baseline and action plan, and live learning that is supported by e-learning so that it can be scaled globally. And the last thing, the sustain element of it, we have trained the trainer and webinars and all that, but the thing that we really had to solve for, and thank you, Chester, for mentioning it, is the stickiness of our plans and our learning and sustaining, so that this the learning doesn't become a one-off. Because I will tell you right now that even in the best learning on this subject, I hope that you guys are going to walk away feeling like, I learned something interesting. I felt motivated. Maybe you'll come out feeling good. But that's important. I'm not minimizing that, but we need to be able to make the learning actually sustainable and usable when we go back to work. So what we did was we developed what we call the Inclusion Virtual Coach app, which takes those 5 areas that we mentioned before, and the leader or manager can click on one of these areas. The app will ask them, when is your next meeting? When is your next performance evaluation? When are you going to be deciding your succession planning? When is your next hire? And then feeding you nudge messages and informative learning specifically around those events so that you can practice them in real time at those events. And that's, the neuroscience behind it is, don't push a manager and a leader into a classroom where they're a prisoner. Give them what they need on their terms. And that has been probably the most exciting journey that I've been on, is translating what we know to be good learning into the neuroscience of what managers and leaders need, and then using technology to make that happen has been the most exciting thing that I've ever done personally. And Chester, I'd like you, if you don't mind, to talk about your new book, Leading with Gratitude. I have so enjoyed it. I think it's possibly one of your best books, although I've enjoyed them all. And if you wouldn't mind just taking a moment to talk about that before we close up and tell people about the tools and the gifts that you and I have decided to give them, that would be great.
Really, in a nutshell, we studied the difference between good leaders and extraordinary leaders was never their hard skills. It was always their soft skills. And number one of those soft skills was the way they express gratitude. Our book is divided into 3 sections really quickly. Those that don't lead with gratitude and why, leading by fear or compensation, or not feeling that, or feeling that people need too much gratitude, to the 8 best practices of seeing and expressing gratitude in the workplace. Some of the people that we know really well, Hébert Joly and Alan Mulally, and on, these great leaders, Ken Chenault from American Express, how they practice gratitude deeply, not only in the workplace, also in their personal lives, and how it wrapped up with then take it home. So why people don't lead, the best practices, and how to lead with gratitude, and then take it home. I'm always inspired by people that go out and teach this very way. I've got a very dear friend, Chris Littlefield, and he is always talking about how we can be more kind and more gentle in the workplace. And it's those kinds of people in our journey, Adrian Gostick and myself, that have inspired us to write this kind of book, and I know that you'll really enjoy it. So, by the way, it makes a great gift. Don't just buy one, buy several. For mitzvahs, wedding anniversaries, birthdays, they make great gifts.
And Veterans Day. All right, so we are going to take some time for questions at the end for those of you who can stay. Remember, you can also contact us by email. We, both Chester and I. So we each have some gifts planned for you. The gifts from me, we have a business case deck for those of you who are either diversity and inclusion professionals or leaders or managers who really want senior leadership to understand what's the business case for getting this done, for training, or for investing in this journey. We have this business case deck that we will give you. The webinar is being recorded, so if you want to share it with your team, you will be getting a link to the recording. You can get a link to the Forbes article that was written about the app if that interests you. I realize that's not really a gift, so to speak, because you could also Google it, but we can get that to you too. We also can get you full demos on any of our technology, not just the app, but the e-learning and the leadership baseline and action plan, as well as a complete demo of the app if that's available to you. But the gift is really that business case deck. It's taken us ages to put it together over the years, and we update it on a quarterly basis. So if you go to our website, leadinclusively.com, and you sign up for the newsletter, you will get that on a quarterly basis. And Chester, I know you had a gift too.
You know, I talked a little bit about our motivators assessment, what people are really passionate about in the workplace. We'd love to offer you a free assessment so you can get your report. Myers-Briggs, who you are, Strength Finders, what you're good at. This fills in that gap. What are you passionate about in the workplace? So all you need to do is email paul@thecultureworks.com, mention the diversity webinar with Chester and Denise, and we'd be happy to send you the assessment and get your feedback on how you feel like it can make you a better and more inclusive leader.
And Elizabeth, in the interest of time, and I know a lot of people will have to drop off, but there may be a few people who want to stay on. Chester, do you have a few moments to field some additional questions, even though we're out of time?
Sure.
Okay. So
we
for those
have
of you, okay, great. And I just want to state again, I know everybody's very focused on time. Hopefully, because it's a holiday for some of you, you have a little extra time. And for those of you who are really crunched, thank you for joining us, and please reach out if we have not fielded your questions. Okay, Elizabeth, the mic is yours.
Okay, first, where can we buy Chester's book? Amazon says it's available March 2020.
Oh. Chester, is that true? Chester, did we lose you? Okay.
Is he frozen? Okay.
It's possible. So I will say, so I did get an advanced copy directly from Chester. If any of you want that, he'd probably be willing to get that to you. If not, I'm sure it can be pre-ordered on Amazon, is my guess. I know the copy that I have doesn't have the actual chapter pages on it, so I know that this listener is probably accurate. So, all right.
Okay, next question. Do you have any suggestions for trying to get staff who are introverted more involved in the workplace?
Oh, what a great question. We spend a lot of time focusing on introverts because a lot of our clients are in tech and STEM generally, in life sciences, and so lots of introverts. And it really is a big deal, and there are very specific strategies associated with that. So I'll share a couple of them with you. People who are introverts tend to operate a lot better one-on-one than they do in group settings. So one suggestion is to provide them with an opportunity to do that, either a one-on-one or email or other opportunity to contribute. They also do a lot better if there's an agenda that is circulated, for example, before a meeting. And or if they are on the agenda or they know that they're expected to contribute ahead of time, because the simple truth is that they are not the kinds of person that is going to be comfortable just spewing anything. They really want to think it through. And I always admire people like that, because sometimes I feel like I speak too quickly and too inclined to contribute when I should be listening. So we don't want to lose that valuable thought leadership that comes from introverts, and so the skills associated with bringing them out is very, very important. Thank you for the question.
Okay, next question. I have a habit of saying thank you to at least one of my team when we leave at the end of the day, because I'm grateful for them showing up. Is this a good use of gratitude? And following on to that, someone else is asking for some specific tips on being grateful with your team.
Okay, so I think it is. I mean, again, I continue to make the mistake with my own team about getting caught up in deadlines and getting, upset when mistakes are made that I thought were corrected. And so if I'm able to say, on a stand up or on a daily meeting of some kind, or at the end of the day, thank you for your hard work. Just, as long as that is truly authentic, I think is appreciated by my team members who might know that I'm just experiencing a lot of stress or tension associated with daily obligations. So my vote is for yes. In terms of showing gratitude, I think Chester mentioned a lot of great examples, and so I might be repeating some of them in his absence. But I think he
I'm
really.
actually back.
Oh, you're back. Okay, great. So the question, Chester, was some examples for gratitude. So why don't you answer that question then?
Yeah. Sorry about that. The cleaning people disconnected the Wi-Fi just for 2 minutes.
Well, you know
Anyway,
what? That's how wonderful that they did that at the end of the webinar.
I
How
know
wonderful.
the timing
Oh
was
my
brilliant.
gosh.
Other than handwritten notes, I've got a wonderful best practice in creating a culture of gratitude, and that is 10 pennies. We got this from a great leader down in Dallas, Texas. He puts 10 pennies in his left pocket every day and sets a goal to have 10 positive interactions every day with his people. And the way he keeps track is he moves a penny from his left pocket to his right pocket. And I think if you're very intentional about gratitude, if you're intentional about wanting to spend time, seeing the things that are going right as opposed to always criticizing the things that are going wrong.
Right.
We ask leaders, are you quick to criticize and slow to recognize? And a culture of gratitude is one where we really do appreciate the simple things. It doesn't have to be the grand gesture, the client saving moment that gets recognized and appreciated. Those little things we do every day, cleaning the library so that when they come in tomorrow, it'll be nice and clean. Those kinds of moments of gratitude, I think, are key. So I'm a big fan of handwritten notes. I'm a big fan of finding those little things to call out every day. And if 10 pennies or 10 coins in your pocket is the trigger that helps you do that, then by all means.
Awesome. I love it. And Elizabeth, any other questions?
Since we have Chester back with us, Chester, we have a few folks asking for clarification about your book.
Right.
They're saying it's available in March. Is that correct, or is there a way to get an earlier copy?
You can pre-order on Amazon. They'll ship it to you a little early. We also recorded an audio version of the book that'll be available soon. Yeah, I apologize. It's not available till March. Trust me, the wait will be worth it. Denise mentioned it. It's by far, I think, our best work. In writing this book, it really was life-changing for us to realize there are so many good leaders out there that really do focus on creating a culture of gratitude, that they are grateful for the opportunity they had to lead and grateful for the sacrifices that people make that work with and for them. So pre-ordered on Amazon. Audiobook will be available soon as well, is the best I can say.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, I've read his other books as well, and I would if you're dying to hear Chester's voice more often, then you can always buy his other, The Carrot Principle. I love, but by all means, pre-order the new one. It's really special.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Elizabeth, anything else? We still have tons of people on the call, which I have to tell you, it warms my heart, because most of the time, well, I realize it's because it's a holiday. Most of the time people are just at the end of the hour, boom, they're off. Anyway, what else, Elizabeth?
All right. Well, it looks like by staying over, we have been able to answer all the questions. So we have lots of people saying thank you, such a great experience, and so much great insights.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Well, enjoy your holiday. Again, our deep respects to all of the veterans that might be on the call, or that may have veterans who have served in their families and close friends. And thank you for joining us. And please keep in touch with us.
You bet. Stay warm. We're grateful for your time. Take care.
Thanks, Chester.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So how fun was that?
It was very fun, and we still have 30 people on there.
It's so funny. A guy comes out, he goes, how come you didn't go inside? I go, this is live. He goes, oh, cool. He walks out.
That was really, it's so funny that, because this is the sort of thing that I always stress about when it comes to webinars is the technology, right? And so then we found out about your situation with the snow and all that, and you're in the vestibule. And first of all, you should have been in that, with a hat and jacket through the whole thing. You must have been freezing, you poor thing. But Matt was just totally calm. Matt on our marketing team, he was like, you know what, Chester will find a way, and you did.
Absolutely. I would never let you down, Denise. Never.
All right, listen, enjoy the rest of your vacation, and we will catch up soon. We'll get all the post-webinar materials out to everybody, and we'll be in touch. Well, people have your direct information, but if we get any inquiries, we will just pass them right on to you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Denise. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.